Well, I'm making progress. This thing fucking sucks. Sorry for swearing. Just like, it's so finicky. It's one of those Chinesian things you just gotta get dialed in. Don't ever pay full price for it. It's just awful. Anywho, this is where we are. There's my pile of stuff I gotta reuse. So the sandblaster I have came with 3.6 mil tips. And it just clogs in the glass bead I have, even though it was supposed to be able to take it. So the glass bead QC was wrong. So I've got this diamond file here, and now it's actually working quite well, opening that hole up to accept the larger glass bead. So this hack works. Well, that was an absolute disaster, mostly because although, again, this glass was supposed to be able to fit through 3.5, even with this, it was still clogging, and then there was just insufficient pressure in behind it, so it was just kind of like vomiting glass. And then it broke, and I got a bunch of glass dust in that friggin' bearing. Okay, so with the brass punch that did it, now I can save this bearing. And another delay, because this thing's a piece of absolute garbage. Now I'm going to fix the whole thing. Pressure chamber works. And King Canada customer service is absolute garbage. So here's the inside of that King Canada Sandblaster. I understand the angle they've done that at to try to get it to work better. But this is choking. It's choking on pretty much everything. And so as a result, I'm going to need, or I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a ball nose end mill and make a curved path from the base up, so it's less of a transition. And then, because when you tighten this down, it blocks the flow, I'm going to mill off a section of this NPT. So, yep. Alright, pull this out. Now that looks better already, but we'll take a closer look here. Okay, so with that ball nose end mill, I've now made a bit of a better transition, I think. I think that'll help get stuff funneled through there, I hope. And I'll probably just leave that as is. I bored a bit too deep, so anyway. Let that clean out, and yeah. Okay, now at full depth, you can see it doesn't actually go through there anymore. So it's not blocking the hole, so that's good. Okay, so now I'm going to sift out everything, and as I was doing this, I realized, wait a second, I have an actual sifter, a machine that vibrates. Oh yeah, that's sweet. Alright, after cleaning out the debris from the inside, I decided to go ahead with the Gliptol and get that sorted, and then prep that. Decided to use the Gliptol color as well, just because it's just nice. And then I'll prime around that. I'll remove the excess with acetone and whatnot. Stupid 2-inch brush, don't buy those. The plastic tip ones, they're just awful with every material. Okay, so now we get to start the Bondo phase. I've got one coat on here. I'm sort of testing it to see how much usability time I had. Nice smooth application down here, and then we started to dry out up there. So looks like it's going to be ultra hipster small batch work. Well, I tried to get more usability time out of this one, so I put very little hardener in it this time. You can see the color difference. So we'll see now. Well, it's time to flip it over and put the Gliptol on the underside there, and start prepping this and using Bondo for it. Because once this is done, everything gets shaved down, and then we start putting the actual gearing back together. So that's the plan. You can see those holes are getting filled now. So that's good. Slow progress.
So I still think the brazing turned out well there. For this part that I couldn't get into, couldn't wet it enough, I'm going to bore it out a little bit, and then I'm going to put some epoxy in there. Because that epoxy will be under compression instead of tension. So I'm just going to take the die grinder and make a easy pass through there and then fill it up. All right, and that's where we'll stop it for now and come clean that up later while the gliptol is drying underneath the old box. And then there's more Bondo, shave it off. And then it's time to get in here. Okay, so I have it up on the actual stand. My Bridgeport attachment there worked well for that. And so now what I'm doing is I'm using the chisels, okay, to get up underneath these pins. And then I'm slowly tapping it in and very carefully removing them. And I did a good job here. And I gotta be careful on this section here as well. So I want both of these off so I can get a nice clean face. And that would complete the removal of things on this part. So I came up with a new way of doing this, and I actually cleaned everything with brake clean, then I mixed the Bondo here, and then I used gloves, because the contours are all very different, and mixing it and then smushing it around with my hands, the gloves broke in some spots, but anyway, sort of working it into the seams almost like molding clay, seemed to do a much nicer coverage job. Still I'm going to have a lot of work to clean up the original sort of mess up there. But yeah, I think there's yeah. All right, going back to the final prep on our top pieces. I've been neglecting or stalling from actually finishing the Bondo job here, but eventually I'll get past that and get into it. So it has been a very, very long time since I've posted anything about this, because this has been stalled due to other priorities. So back at it now. I've got a lot of work to do to get this all smooth, ready for paint, and then once this is done and painted, I'll get into the head and get into the harder machining. So now I got to scrape all this down. I'm going to start with the knife. I always find like Bondo works better with like a large knife, box knife or scraping blade first, and then hit it with sandpaper. Well, obviously it's going to be powered, but yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Not sure how much video I take of it because it's kind of boring, but so as I go through this, I'm trying to shape it since there's a little bit of bend before these snap. And as I mentioned before, I often find that just going off the knife to get rid of the really big clumps is a lot easier than doing the other way. This has a different amount of hardener in it, you can tell. And this is closer to the spec, but something didn't work right. So a lot of this is really soft. So it might have to be a lot of work redone here, but it's sat this way for months. So as long as the adhesion's okay, then that's all right too. So this area here had particularly bad adhesion and bad chemistry on the inside. It was just super soft. As we move towards the edges, it starts to harden up again. So obviously the mixing, I suppose, was the problem there. We'll go ahead and see how much blending is needed, or if I need to make up another batch, something more similar to the nice, much harder, much more color appropriate Bondo that I have down there. So anyway, this, even though I cleaned it post sandblasting and all that sort of stuff, the adhesion here is pretty garbage. All right, so it's coming along well. Moved outside because positive pressure in there wasn't enough. I probably ended up actually making a draft back in, so works pretty well. Just got to get the flavor down right. Well, the drill's getting pretty hot. The job is coming along well, but it's almost time to switch over to the belt sander, I'd say.
So I thought I was actually doing pretty decent there, but it turns out all of that was just dust. So the dust filled in nice, but then I brushed it away, and this looks more like what I thought it should look like at this time. So still next steps are going to be the sander. Okay, so combination of the belt sander, which was good for the large flat areas, and this orbital sander is doing well. Because the orbital sander is more malleable around the pad, it's a lot easier and nicer to get into the harder spaces. So if you're doing something like this, the orbital one is the way to go. Anyways, more to go. I'm gonna get rid of all the lines, but it's coming. So, yep. All right, that's where it's going to stop for this weekend. It is coming along. That looks pretty good. Next up is very smooth. You can see the divots here, which is where the other brush dug in lots because there was lots of mismatch and softness. But anyway, I'm just going to go over by hand once more, I think. And then I'm going to get it all primed and painted. And then finish the gliptol on places I missed. And then it's going to be onto the machining part. So it's going to go back on its stand and gotta put the head together and then test it. That's the big part of the job with our motor. Another fun part to do while the other thing is getting primed is to work on the assembly that allows the counterweight to slide up and down. So there's a little tiny set screw here. Let's remove that. We'll be able to pop the pin through and properly clean this out. And that will be good for the part of the reassembly since this is still on the outer side, but we do need this to be nice and smooth. All right, so here we go. We've got the main U bracket, the roller, and the pin. And so this is a pretty easy process. You know, the drill, get down to bare metal, the brushes, and ready for priming. So we've got a magically appearing part number here. This looks like Delta Papa 122 or possibly 128. It's pretty hard to tell on that last side. I think it's a 2 though. If I look at it this way, yeah, look in the camera. Delta Papa 122. I have no idea what that means. Do you know? Let me know in the comments if you do. And short on space. So that's how it starts. Anywho, primed, wait till that gets painted, and yeah, picking away. All right, I'm starting to pick away at this again, so while I'm waiting for other stuff to get done and sorted, here's the outside covering for the Progress. Outside here is going to be the gray. This is going to be shined chrome, as you can sort of see it is. And I'm going to go and make a gasket either out of cork, I think, and a piece of plexiglass to go here, which is going to serve as the viewport for the oil inside the head. All right, so we're going to start with this and just cut that out and then roll with that exterior shape. All right, with that cut out, we've got our basic shape. So that'll be good for the time being. Now I got to figure out how thick plexiglass I'm going to use for this. So I went ahead down to the stockpile. Unfortunately, I found something that was thick enough to match the inside bevel and the inside bevel on the other piece. It's close enough anyway. So I'm going to cut a little segment out, plop it in, and then we'll test fit the old window. Okay, so this is how I have to do it. I'll move 2 hands. You get the idea. Okay, so this is our piece, or at least the inside. And I'm going to start shaping the corners here. And then we'll use some gasket filler and then everything else to sort of really keep it in there. Actually, I just might silicone it and let it sit. So, it might need a little bit more trimming because of the angles from the cut, but we're getting there.
Okay, there's that half. And now this half should fit pretty much right over top of it. And it does, but there's obviously some space, so that's great. I went around and molded the edges with the belt sander and did the edges as well here with the belt sander too. Anywho, that'll be good. Nice replacement. And that'll plunk. It actually fits right in there. That's the perfect size for that. It was 1350 thousandths. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to make the gasket material now. No sense in delaying really on that. And or I'll just put some silicone. Haven't really or fully decided yet. But I'm going to do that now, and then I'll paint around the edge afterwards. Well, I broke the cork gasket that I was going to use, so I'm just going to use the chemical solution around since it's probably starting to harden a bit already. So, bigger the gob, better the job, and then some acetone. Okay, so with some 8/32, or 8/32s rather, fasteners put back in, we've got a nice, we've got a nice setup there, and it looks pretty good. I'm content with that. I don't know if they're exactly the right thread, but steel beats iron, so they are now. And then I'll go over this and polish it up and get rid of the mess over here, obviously. But we'll let this sit, cure, and that'll be good. Finally figured out what DP stands for. Drill press. All right, now this batch is out of the ultrasonic cleaner. This is the original part here that looks really nice, all cleaned up and ready to get primed. And here's the one that was repaired prior. So this is also ready for being primed, so that's good. We'll be able to get that up and done today. Here is the remaining part of the chain that attaches to the actual quill to bring it up and down. And then that ends up going there. So, still picking away at things. But slowly and steadily. And now for the paint shop. So we're out now in the crisp fall air getting this first coat on. It's a bit of a momentous occasion, I'd say. Things are starting to get ready to go back together, and then the hard stuff comes. I won't bore you with that. You all know what painting looks like. So with that done, I had a little bit of extra time and couldn't really help myself, so I got the first coat on. That is helpful. It motivates me to keep going. All right, here are the parts I have to braze. There's the crack that we cored out a while ago. Similarly for where the pins had to change. So I'm gonna fill those up with brazing material. And yeah, I don't have any pieces of ceramic to go in there, though I might find some old spark plugs or something. Maybe that'll work. Okay, so here's the setup. We've got the 3 cams, or levers, I guess, actually placed back on one of the shafts, the one that has sort of the most carbon coming out of it, because they should all expand equally, because that's carbon steel, but either way, it's the one that has the largest amount of play in it. So underneath that, sort of in the holes but not on the parts, I have put some weld anti-spatter. And so the idea, I think, is going to be for me to try to move these around as I sort of get a base with the brazing. Now, I looked for ceramic parts like old spark plugs, couldn't find any. So this is what I'm going to do, and hopefully that works. That would be good. And then that piece there. So I'm going to preheat things right now with the propane torch, and then get into more focused work with the acetylene. Right, so here's the baking process. And I'll use this again to help slowly cool them down. Okay, well, I definitely could have used some ceramic. That proved to be harder than necessary. Quite a bit of heat left, so now I'm going to let this cool down slowly, then wrap it up. And yeah, this one is not bound. It's just it's not coming off right now. I'm making sure it's loose, but I'm going to slowly let this cool down with the propane torch, and then we're going to wrap it. And I thought my aluminum plate was big enough to not have this concrete slab explode in my face, but it did.
Okay, now it's cool down time.
I'm sure the C5 can take video, and I just forget how to do it. But pretty spicy still, so time to wrap it all up and let it sleep. Good night. Have a good sleep. All right, so I woke them from their slumber, ground them down a little bit. This will have to be done on the lathe as expected. I'm not confident about this one here. This seam seems to be rather prominent, but it only needs to hold a pin. And then we have this one over here. That seems to have come out a little bit better. We'll have to take a closer look at that later, but I think this is fine. And now a stronger case for reassembly can be made, the harder parts, and the engineering of how to put this together so when the next person comes in, they don't have to bore stuff out. So we're back on the stand now that we have first coat on. And the next steps are going to be to reassemble. So that's pretty cool. So here we go. I'm going to be slowly working this back and forth down. And then we'll put the bearings in. Because we got to fill that spot up and we got to make sure everything else is connected. But either way, spindle's got to go in, and that's pretty cool. Remember how much work that was to remove? God damn. So prior to spindle reinsertion, we've got these two collars that need to go on. They were originally painted, but honestly, I kind of like the polished look a little bit better. Plus, they should be in an environment where they're constantly getting oil on them anyway. So, or at least they should be. I don't really want to paint these. I think that's probably a disservice to the next person. So I think I'll just coat them in oil and end up putting them on. If they don't look good, then I'll paint them in situ. But honestly, I think the look of that, you know, that raw cast looks just a lot better. So put that on. Once the spindle's down through the first bore, I'll loop these on and push the spindle back in today. Okay, it's pretty cool. We're going back in here now. So I gotta put those collars on. Okay, with the bottom end of the quill and spindle supported, I was able to get this piece in. Now, the video of the repair for this on the lathe, trimming down the brass, wasn't filmed because I couldn't find my phone, but there you go. So I just pulled that down on the lathe, and by pulled I mean turned down, and by filmed I mean with a potato. And this now thankfully freely is able to move up and down through the tensioning of the Allen key there. So that's really important. This took a little bit of effort to get on because this end was mushroomed from all the attempts of getting it on before. But this is now sliding pretty much up and down. And I have to figure out the next problem of getting that to seat, which will mean removing this and hoping that the quill will be able to move enough, but I might need to insert the gears. Either way, that's that. Okay, so with the Blue Giant here, I'm trying to transfer this now even heavier headstock over to the base so I can work on it from various different heights by using the base itself to do the work. So maybe this can make the jump across Springfield Gorge. We'll see. Decided to change the center of mass location. That way I can stick this metal plate over. Okay, so I'm going to start putting back together what I can from this and all the other parts. Now that we have a appropriate means of, well, getting there. The test piece is in, or rather the drive shaft is in, testing wise. There's still quite a bit of friction everywhere in there. But we will almost certainly need gearing to move that just by hand to raise the quill up and down, which of course is why we have gearing. So we have a Whitworth key in here somewhere. Probably should have had that. That's right there. But yeah, okay, so that's in. I gotta figure out how to get the spring load it to drive it, engage and disengage. Yeah. So bonus nachos here. This doesn't have to come out, so that's great because I can just move that whole mechanism out. So that's perfect. Excellent. So here's the setup to test. You can see I've been wrenching on this a little bit. It's really tight now. I think I've loosened it to the point where it will actually work, which is why I wanted to catch this, because this will be the first time that this quill has been raised and lowered since who knows when. So let's just, yes! Here we go. Look at that. Up, down. It's the king. It's the king. Here we go. Work the oil in through a bit here, and then maybe that'll help. Okay, so it does actually look that while I'm filming this through a greasy potato, that I won't need to actually cut a keyway through this, and I'll be able to use the original repair. I've re-tapped these holes for a 1/4 inch 20, and I'm able to set them in just fine. So that's what I'll end up doing, and I'll put that piece back together. On the underside, part of the reason I'm doing this is because I would have to cut in something to prevent this sliding down. Even if the keyway is there. So this seems to be like a method to avoid that. So this sits on top of that brass bushing here. And, or maybe it's, no, that's where the washer goes. Yeah, so that's where the washer goes. So this is how it's going to sit for the time being. And I think it'll be okay. Look, there's the focus again. I still don't know how to use this freaking phone. Nicely redone tapped holes here. I am still mulling about whether I want to cut that keyway and put a little something in there. Might be worth it just to transfer any load, but it's probably okay, though it is sloppy. All right, so the key is in place. It's threaded, kid's crying. And I think we'll call that the weekend. So this is where this video ends. Appreciate your time. Welcome back. And thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for blah, 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 blah.